Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi continues in chapter 2 of Sanhedrin, Mishnayot Gimel Daled. Today, yesterday in Aleph, we covered the Kohen Gadol. In Beit, we moved to the Melech, the king. Now we continue in Gimel, Met Lo Met. The relative of the king passes away. Eino Yotzi Mipetach Paltrin Shalo. The king does not leave the entrance of his palace. He stays in the palace, and the people come and they comfort him, but he does not go along with the burial procession. Rabbi Yehuda Omer disagrees, says, Im Rotze, let's say, if the king wants to go out, Achar Mita Yotze, to go out and join the funeral procession, the burial party, he may go out. Sheken Matzino B'David, that King David went out to attend to a funeral himself. Sheyatza Achar Mitato Shel Avner. He followed the funeral procession and was engaged in the burial of Avner, the famous general of Israel. Shenemar v'hamelech David holech achrei mitah. King David himself went after the funeral bed to burial. Amru, they told Rabbi Yehuda, lo haya davar ele lefayas ha'am. They said this was not the normal custom of a king to go to a funeral. This was to settle down the nation. So they're saying this was not really required, but it was politically appropriate at the time. Now, what had happened, and you can see the third chapter of the second book of Shmuel, for what happened here was after Shaul, the first king, died, he had a son, Ishbosheth, who claimed to be king and was supported by General Avner, who was a very popular general. And what happened was Avner saw eventually that David the Melech really had the favor of Hashem and should really become the king. So Avner said, listen, David, I'm going over to you. My forces will support you. And another general, Yoav, one of David's generals, thought that Avner was doing this underhandedly as a ruse and ended up assassinating Avner. Yoav assassinated Avner. David the Melech didn't want the people to think that Yoav had been instructed to do so by David the Melech. So he went out, even though it was not required or necessarily appropriate for a king, he went out to the funeral of Avner and was engaged in mourning Avner to show the nation that he had no part in the assassination of that general. The Mishnah adds, when they feed the melech, the mourner's meal, remember the first seuda, the first food that a mourner eats after the burial, kola am mesubin ala aretz, the people all sit on the floor, vehut mesev ala dargash. The king doesn't sit on the floor, he sits on a fancy couch to eat. On to Mishnah Daled, motzi lemilchemet arashut alpi beitin shel shivim ve'echad. And the king leads the nation out to war when it's a war of choice, a war that is being done for expansion or for economic gain or to, as sort of a preemptive attack to, take riches and take spoils, not as a war of self-defense. So that's only done on the authority of the Sanhedrin. And we actually mentioned in the last parak, it's mentioned in the Gemara in Brachot Gimel Amud Beit 3b that David HaMelech consulted the Urim V'Tumim and the Sanhedrin before going out to such a war. We mentioned Syria was conquered by King David for financial well-being of Am Yisrael. Of course, a war of self-defense or a preemptive war to prevent your enemy from building weapons of mass destruction, the king would not need to consult the Sanhedrin before engaging in such activities. That's to protect the entire nation. It's pikuach nefesh. And the Mishnah adds, "Uporitz lasot lo derech." The king can knock down buildings and property and trees to make the road for his soldiers and his army. And no one can protest. It's called eminent domain in modern legal parlance. And the road of the king has no maximum width. We mentioned this at the end of Bava Metzia. The king can make the road as big as he needs to accommodate his military forces. V'kola am bozizin, and all the soldiers, they take plunder during war, v'notnin lefanov, and they put it in front of the king and let the king choose if he wants any of it, and then of course the king will divide it among the soldiers as he sees fit. Hu noto chelik barosh, but he has first pick if he wants certain plunder. Lo yarbelo nashim, the king cannot have too many wives. What's too many? Elishmonesrei, only 18, no more than 18. And the Gemara actually learns this out. The Rav Bartner cites it here. The Gemara learns this out from a conversation David HaMelech had with Natan a Navi. And Natan Navi said, if you need to have more wives, only have Kehena ukehena, like these and like these. Well, how many were these? He had 6 wives already. So Natan Navi was saying, like another 6 and another 6. So a total of 18 and no more. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, again, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, Marbe hulo. No, the king could take more wives if he wants to. And it's something we do see by Shlomo HaMelech, though many, or the vast majority of Shlomo HaMelech's marriages, were not necessarily out of love in a relationship, but to cement a treaty with other nations. It used to be the minhag. The custom back then was if you made a treaty, a peace treaty with another nation to be friendly, then the daughter, the princess, would go and live with the other king. And that way, of course, the father-in-law is not going to come and attack the city because his daughter is living there and everyone's living at peace. So he married Shlomo Melech married a lot of princesses to cement peace treaties with other nations. So Rabbi Yehuda says, really, there's no legal limit. Yehu mesirot et libo, as long as the wives are not making his heart astray, which was eventually the problem of Shlomo Melech. There were so many wives to keep track of, and so many of them had come from foreign kingdoms, idolatrous kingdoms, that he could not engage in proper hashgacha of, making sure every single wife was not secretly engaged in any avodah zarah or sponsoring avodah zarah activities. He wasn't able to keep track of all of them, and that led to a lot of problems, and Shlomo Melech is blamed for the avodah zarah sponsorship that some of the princesses engaged in. Rabbi Shimon Omer afilu achad. Rabbi Shimon says even one wife, umesirat libo, and who is leading astray the heart of the king, harei ze lo yiseina. Then he can't marry her. He can't even have one wife if that wife he's going to marry is someone who leads him astray. And we can think of Achav and Jezebel, the famous Jezebel, who really led King Achav to disaster. Imken, if so, Lama ne'amar v'lo yerbelu nashim. So why does it say don't have too many wives, according to Rabbi Shimon? If Rabbi Shimon says not even one wife who's no good, so not too many, afilu ka'avigail. Even if all of them are as righteous as Avigail, who was, in the Gemara described she was extremely wise and extremely pious and had Yirat Shemayim, even if there's, like her, no more than 18. The Mishnah adds, Lo yobelo susim, the king should not have too many horses, elekadei merkavto, only enough for the chariots of his army to defend the Jewish people. And the Torah itself actually warns the king shouldn't have too many horses because Egypt, Mitzrayim, was the best source of horses back then, and it would lead the people to going down to Mitzrayim, staying in Mitzrayim, doing business there, and that's something the Torah does not want Jews living in Mitzrayim. The kesef, the zahav, and silver and gold, lo yarbelo me'od. He can't have too much. Now, it doesn't say lo yarbe, it says lo yarbe lo me'od. The king should definitely have some gold and silver on hand, but not a ridiculous amount. Ele kedei liten of sonya. Enough to pay his soldiers and pay his officials. So the idea is that the king shouldn't be hoarding wealth in his treasury. He should have a balanced budget and be taking in enough money to support the needs of the nation and the needs of the armed forces to defend the nation. V'kartev lo, and he writes for himself, Sefer Torah lishmo, a personal Sefer Torah for his own use and learning. Yotze le'melchama, when he goes out to war, motzia imo, he brings the Sefer Torah with him. He probably writes a small portable size Sefer Torah. Nichnas, when he comes back from war, machnisa imo, bring the Sefer Torah with you. Yoshev bedin, when he sits down to try a court case, and again, the kings from the Davidic dynasty, including Melech HaMashiach, will be engaged in judging the kings of Israel. The rabbis decided it was not appropriate. There was a lot of problem between the judiciary and the monarchy. Huimo, he brings the Sefer Torah with him, for reference. He has reference books when he's judging a case. Mesiv, when he sits down, reclines to eat dinner. He connecto, keep the Sefer Torah opposite you. The Mefarshim say in an aron, and in an appropriate place. Of course, not on the table with the gravy, but have the Sefer Torah right there. Shneimar v'haita imo, the Sefer Torah should be with the king. V'karabo kol yemei chayv, and he should read the Sefer Torah all the days of your life. And it's a stark reminder, whatever we're doing, even if we're not literally learning Torah, whatever we're doing, we should have in mind, I'm doing this to allow me to learn Torah, do mitzvot, do chesed, help people, be in a person who adds to Am Yisrael. So even if you're eating or sleeping or relaxing, you can do those things, what we call l'shem shemayim, for the purpose of having the energy to learn more Torah and do more mitzvot and help more Jews in the future. Yashar kochachem, tizkul mitzvot.